Thanks for tuning into this episode of FinTech Focus TV, powered by Harrington Starr, the global leaders in financial technology recruitment. Head over to the Harrington Starr website where you'll be able to find all the latest jobs in financial technology across the globe. You'll also be able to download the latest issue of the Financial Technologist magazine, including the Top 1% Workplace Awards. Finally, if you're looking to grow your team, please get in touch. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of FinTech Focus TV with me, Toby Babb, and today I am absolutely delighted to be reacquainted after 8 years or so.
Something like that.
With Ben Brown from Flock. Ben, how are you?
Perfect. Great to meet you, Toby.
Listen, great to have you in here. As you say, it's been a journey. It was a long time since we worked with you in a previous life, and great catching up and hearing the story, and it sounds like you've been doing some pretty cool, pretty wonderful things over the last few years. We want to focus this sort of episode on what you're doing over at Flock, obviously, but also hearing about your sort of journey. You were head of engineering when we worked with you a long time ago. You're a CTO now. I think there's lots of people out there at the moment who have that same sort of aspiration and want to go on that pathway. So we're going to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly, and everything in between. Sounds about good. How you made that transition. We're going to hear a little bit about journeys of high growth and high performing teams, which is a big passion of mine. I know it's something you're very passionate about as well at the same time. And really sort of find out a little bit more about you and the journey. So really looking forward to it. I've enjoyed having a little sneak preview so far as well from it too. But before we get into everything, Ben, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Flock as well.
Yeah, perfect. So as you say, currently CTO at an insurtech called Flock. Our mission is to make the world quantifiably safer. So essentially we do commercial fleet insurance. So that's for fleets like couriers or tradespeople or taxis. And we essentially use data that we can get from telematics to basically underwrite your policy and give you a better price, if you like.
Fantastic.
Now the idea is that we can use that and we can, as we say, make the world quantifiably safer and hopefully save some lives by stopping some accidents along the way. And
so you've got some purpose behind
what
you're doing.
That's the kind of really dream part of it.
And is that one of the things you mentioned there as a dream part of it? Is that something there which attracts you to the business? Because I think, I read and watch and listen a lot to things about elite performance teams and environments, etc. And quite often businesses with purpose comes into that. And I often sort of think about that. People, the famous stories about Kevlar and NASA and NASA's purpose being to put a man on the moon, etc. is very, very clear. When you're talking there about making the world safer, etc., that's something which is a little bit more all-encompassing than just doing a job and making sure tech works for a business.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And was that something which sort of became part of your decision making?
I think it certainly is. So there is a bit of a connection between Flock and one of my older employers. So prior to this, I used to work for an electric vehicle subscription service called Onto. Flock were actually our insurer for the last year of my time at Onto. So, and
is that coincidence, or was that actually just?
It is a bit of coincidence. So unfortunately, there wasn't quite such a nice end to kind of Onto. We went into administration in September. Yeah. But I very coincidentally got talking to Flock about a CTO role, but I came at it from also knowing a little bit about the product and being a customer of Flock and knowing what we can kind of do with that. So I realised they're doing something a little bit different. But the mission definitely has an impact. Knowing that your work actually does something good, I think is a strong motivator for me. But it also, I think, it also has some amazing challenges along the way. So we're in a world where, as I said, we want to use data to better underwrite your policy. Now, there's lots of people trying this, and nobody's really nailed that challenge yet. And so I think we've got a big challenge there, but it's going to be exciting to try and do that.
What do you think has stopped people from getting that right so far?
I think it is a challenging situation. There are people out there doing things like driver scoring algorithms, driver scores that pop up on kind of personal policies. So you can go and get a black box style policy for your own car nowadays. It's not been done quite so much in the commercial fleet sector, and that's something that we're obviously trying to address. I think we've gone through a little bit of consolidation in that kind of space over the past few months. We've had a couple of exits by companies, a couple of companies that have been purchased by large insurers, and that's probably showing where the challenge comes. But one of the pieces is you need a lot of data to do this stuff. So as you start to grow your business, you do need quite a lot of cars, you do need quite a lot of subscribed vehicles. So we're starting to build that up. You need then a lot of expertise in understanding that data, connecting that to the factors that do influence the accidents. And that, all in all, that just came across as a really exciting kind of tech challenge, and got me on board, and with the extra cherry on top that actually if we can save lives along the way, that's even better.
So we've got that sort of overarching purpose. We've got tech challenge, which I think is always important to a technologist as well. And I think this is interesting for a CTO, particularly in this sort of marketplace, which we've seen over the last year with, if we go back to the wider tech space and we go back to the start of 23, end of 22, the tech layoffs, the uncertainty in the area, I think it drove a lot of people to take jobs as opposed to really, and what I mean by take jobs is just get something rather than nothing. And then there are people there who are a little bit more commercially minded about saying, right, I want to make sure I'm getting the right thing and there's something which aligns to where I want to go. So you have those two areas which are important to you, but speaking beforehand and going back to when we've worked together in previous lives, the idea of high performing teams is sort of a thread all the way through from when you were a head of engineering before to where you now sit as a CTO, and that's an incredibly energizing and exciting thing to look at, because I think a lot of businesses, every business will look at it and say, right, we want to be a high performing business, we want to be a world class business, but the steps and the consistency to do that, in my mind, starts with recruitment, moves on to then engagement afterwards, and then to keeping standards and accountability to those pieces afterwards. So there's a podcast I listen to which always starts with the same question, which is, what does high performance mean to you? So I'll bastardize it a little bit and say, when you're talking about what high performance teams looks like to you and building high performance teams, what does building a high performance team look like to you?
Yeah, so I think you summed up a few pieces there. I think first of all, you've got to get the right people into that team, and I think importantly, that doesn't mean everybody's the same or everybody's identical. I think diversity is a big part of that kind of getting the right team in place. So it is about sourcing that team, getting that right team in. I'm a big fan of Patrick Lencioni books. I can't remember what the one is around interviewing, but kind of the three.
So this, he's got the five. Is it not as five?
The five dysfunctional teams is most famous, but there's one around interviewing. The ideal team player. That's the one.
I feel like I should have known that, but there's another one for my list.
Yeah, and that one's brilliant because it says the model is basically hungry, humble, smart.
Yeah.
And I learned that a few years ago, and I've reflected on it, and it really does seem to kind of identify the sorts of people you want to bring in.
Yeah.
Well, why hungry? Because you want people to want to do better, to want to learn and grow, to want the team to improve. Why humble? Well, I certainly have a no assholes policy in teams. I want to be working with people that I enjoy working with.
Yeah. Someone said to me that, or I heard someone say, I'd rather have a hole in the team than an arsehole.
Yeah. probably very true. Yeah. I mean, it's building product is a team game.
Yeah.
It's not a individual sport.
Absolutely.
If you like.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of companies that have started to realise that. There's some that are still perhaps very focused in on, well, I just want the best individual person that I can bring in here. And my view is I need the best person that's going to fit into that team and work well with that team, and that's what's going to make the team more successful as opposed
to just the skill set. I think that's a really important part of it. So I cut you across. You there. Apologies. So you talked about hungry, you talked about humble, and the third piece was
is smart.
Smart, yeah.
And that's smart. Not really just in the IQ way, which is clearly what a lot of people might look for. Yes, it's great to get somebody who's got a good IQ, but it's probably more EQ so on the people side. The EQ space is just as important, if not far more important, because again, it's a team game. We're not doing this as individuals.
So let's come circle back on that, because I'm a massive agreement with you on all of those. But what isn't so easy, and I talk about this as as a 24-year recruiter wearing cobbler's shoes in this sort of example as well, is it's not an easy thing to do to get that right. And let's start with the hungry piece. To examine what hunger looks like in an interview process is not an easy play, because I think there's. Going back to the smart bit, it's unlikely you're going to be interviewing anyone who's not smart enough to recognise that you should talk about being hungry in an interview. So what defines that to you when you're speaking to people?
I mean, I think the first thing is you've got to be asking people to tell you about examples of times when they've demonstrated those behaviours.
Yeah.
It's all too easy to ask somebody to tell you about something that they could have read in a book or read online or wherever it happens to be. So I think you're looking for examples of things like, tell me your greatest learning ever, or tell me about when you improved a team, or tell me when you improved yourself. And you're looking for that kind of growth mindset and that example that they're going to give you. And then, normally you have to drill in with a few follow-up questions on top of that to see where that's going. But you're looking for those examples of somebody having demonstrated that sort of ability, generally on multiple occasions in multiple different places.
And similarly with humility and smartness, again, example-based and evidence-based as opposed to giving you the dictionary definitions.
Yeah. And I'd probably argue the humility one's a little bit easier to kind of judge by a conversation. I don't think you're probably going to be asking questions that specifically target that, but you will be picking that up in all the other answers. Is this person talking about team achievements? Are they talking about their achievements?
Yeah.
Do they believe they're the one that helped change things, or do they believe that they just contributed to a team that was making things better? Those subtle differences, I think, will tell you how people think about it.
I want to touch, speaking of humility, it's going to be a difficult one for you to answer because I get the impression that that's something you hold dear to you as well. But look, you've had a really strong career and you've worked for some great names and you've done some cool stuff over the last decade in particular. But let's look at people who are watching this who are thinking, right, I want to be a CTO. I'm in engineering at the moment. That's the pathway I want to go on. Looking at your journey. And as I said, look, 8 years ago we were talking to you as a head of engineering. Tell us about what allowed you and the pathway that allowed you to get to CTO now, and to be doing some cool stuff in a really cool company, to be attractive to the marketplace as you've got that sort of job, and doing something that's as you say, taking this legacy from the previous CTO, which we'll come on to in a bit, and turning it into something where you've got immediate credibility. So if you were to look at some of to A, describe that journey, and B, talk about some of the traits that you've had and what you've done to put yourself in that position, I think that'd be a really helpful thing to discuss.
Sure. Yeah. So I think looking at the kind of pivotal moments where things had to change. So I started my career a relatively traditional way, did a computer science degree, graduated, went into a graduate scheme, actually joined a graduate scheme at Lehman Brothers in 2007 and 2008. Unfortunately, Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. So that probably in some way influenced my future. It gave me some view of risk and what happens to potentially large versus small companies. And I always say, it probably taught me that large companies can go bankrupt, maybe not quite as easily as small ones, but it happens.
Yeah, and if it's not bankruptcy, there's redundancies and all those sort of things. I don't think anything's ever 100% secure, is it?
Totally. After I'd probably done a few years as kind of a more technologist, solving technical problems, what I really had at that point was a really great leader. A guy called Des Matthewman. He was probably the guy that helped me to understand, and the way he phrased it to me was, you're getting paid for this IQ stuff at the moment. Well, if you want to continue to progress and you want to continue to get more senior, you're going to have to change it and improve this EQ stuff. I'm not going to pay you any more to do IQ. I am going to pay you more if you do the EQ. And the pay more bit was probably at the time a pushback to what was important to me. It was the thing that was perhaps driving some of my motivation. So he was very pivotal in kind of explaining that to me, and then probably for the next 2 or 3 years, really helping me understand what good looked like, and coaching and nudging in the right direction as I went through that learning phase of understanding why EQ was so important. So that's probably one of the pivotal kind of pieces, and that was what I guess gave me that opportunity to succeed, and then he really helped to support me through coaching to kind of get to that point. I think the other thing is, I guess you have to care about making that change yourself ultimately. I could have quite happily stuck with the engineering bit. I could have just continued to do that. But
people do.
And that's no criticism. That's just what people enjoy. Yeah. I think what I realised was I needed to go out and learn more. So I probably did a lot of reading at the time. I did a lot of thinking about things, attending events, trying to do more on the EQ side, because I realised that was where I was going to, that's where I was going to kind of be more senior and kind of get into those roles. I think as perhaps next pivotal point is when I got to Intuit, and at Intuit I joined there as a head of engineering. I joined to lead their European teams, and this was a 10,000 person organisation, but they had maybe 12 engineers in Europe, so very small. And the idea was I could come in and help them to perhaps expand that a little bit, bring in a bit more kind of structure in that European region. As part of that role, I got asked by the country manager at the time, a guy called Chris Evans, would I join the leadership team for the UK? And that was kind of my first opportunity to sit on a cross-functional leadership team. And the big message that he kind of taught me and really reinforced across his whole team was, you're a cross-functional leader of the business first, you're a technology leader second. And again,
that's important, that, isn't it? Yeah.
Probably didn't settle straight on into it. You make some mistakes, you go through that process of learning, you do a few things where you don't go in the right direction, and that was really the point where I understood that I could just keep talking about tech all the time and just focusing on that, or actually I could become this cross-functional leader, and that's how I truly kind of take up that CTO role, and ultimately that was what paved the way for me taking that first kind of C-suite role, was I think the experience I gained there.
I think that sort of C-suite role of a CTO has changed enormously over the past 10, 15, 20 years. And what I mean by that is when I first started in the industry, the IT director or the CTO, which weren't actually as far apart as they were as they are today, and not everyone would have a CTO, but the IT director may well be on the board, was very much a sort of I guess a nice to have, and it was certainly seen as a cost. And now I think when you're looking at a CTO, it's probably one of the most fundamental positions on a board, and it has much more of a voice. But I also think it's developed from someone there who had probably been much more about flashing lights and cool gadgets, through to a commercially minded person, which comes back to that cross-functional piece, where you're translating business needs into through technology and gaining efficiency and productivity through technology. And I think that's a really important part of it, that the role of the CTO or the evolution of the CTO has come into that sort of very commercial-based role as opposed to a pure technical role. And I guess that's what you're alluding to there as well, right?
It is, yeah. And I think not everybody's probably on board with that yet. I think there's still some people who are still in the holdout. I've been through interview processes in the past where people have wanted to kind of test my technical skills, and that is no longer my strongest skill set. That's not how I deliver value anymore. And it isn't to say that I don't need to do the technology side of it. I do. But where I really deliver the value is setting up the team for success, setting up the team with the right tools, setting up the high-performing environment, and then working cross-functionally with my other leaders to deliver the right product.
And that comes back to that whole piece about hiring right and putting the right team in place, because again, if you're looking at the sort of book derivation of leadership, you're talking about hiring people that are better than you, putting the right people in the right seats, etc., so you can do that, and that being the skill set. I think there's a lot of ego that sits, going back to your point about humility, there's a lot of ego that sits in the CTO world, where people have to be the smartest person in the room, and they have to be the person with all the technology answers, and they have to drive the agenda. But what we're talking about here is having someone who comes into the CTO role who's making the team the star, and having the confidence and the self-awareness to be able to do that, whilst not then saying, right, I have to know every single answer and I have to be driving that tech piece, which is quite a vulnerable position to be in as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think if I was the best technologist there, then the team needs to change, and we need to bring in better technologists, because that's clearly not how we're going to succeed. And I've been, I think you could say luck, but I think it's probably deliberate that there's been far better technologists in the teams that I've come into. I think where I can help them is I can nudge them in the right direction. I can give them the coaching and support that I got from my earlier leaders that helped me to go in that direction. And some of them want to stick on that kind of technical track for the rest of their lives. They want to be amazing heads of architecture, chief architects, that side of things, and help them to go in that direction. But I'm never going to take that role away from them. I don't need to be the architect.
And so let's talk about that sort of thing, because again, we speak to a lot of engineers, and one of the things they talk about is wanting to have brilliant technologists around them. And when you're sat there and you're saying, right, I get where you can help mentor people through to be great leaders and all that sort of stuff, which is going to be an important pathway for people to go into. When you're looking at the technology path, so let's say there's two pathways, the leadership pathway and the career technologist piece. When you've got people in there, we know that the average tenure of a software developer is as low as 18 months at the moment. keeping those people engaged and giving them the opportunity and the tutoring and the coaching and the development to carry on doing that. How do you do that when, I can absolutely see how you can give that the benefit of your skills there, but if you aren't the smartest technologist in the room, how do you help pull the bow back to fire those people as far as you can?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different things. So first of all, you need to have smart technologists in your company. Just because I'm not that person doesn't mean I don't need to try and find those people and bring them in. So I think good people want to work with good people, so they want to work with good engineers, and you need to find and hire those people if they don't already exist. And, normally, I've gone into organisations and I've found a few of those people, and you can build teams around them because people want to come and work with those people. I think the second one is, most technologists, they enjoy learning and growing. We don't work in an industry where things stand still. Things are moving at such a pace that it's almost impossible to stay up to date with what's going on. So I think what I can do is buy people time and opportunity to learn and grow. So yes, there's a day job of delivery. Yes, we need to get things done. But in some of the organisations that I've joined, I've always worked through like a 10% time or a kind of 20% time, or those sorts of things that came out of the Google 20% time to give people an opportunity. I remember you talking about that. Yeah, it's important. I think and it's sometimes a challenging sell because so you're going to take away all my engineers for 10% of their time. I always do 10%. I think that tends to work a little bit better. 20% people struggle with that one a little bit. You don't pay most of people aren't generally paid as engineers for hours by the hour anyway. So we don't really. We don't really kind of literally watch them by the second and kind of able to judge them by the second. So giving them that time to spend, to learn, to grow is an important part. I think solving interesting technical problems then is the real part of it. While there's a lot of engineers who do love the technology, the ones that I prefer to work with also care about actually solving some good problems along the way as well, and using that technology for kind of a good use. And so finding those problems, understanding those problems, I say that's one of the things that drew me to Flock in the first place is, there's some good problems there. I know I'll be able to keep people interested on those. I know I'll be able to create a...
How did you find out? What constitutes a good problem for you?
For me personally, I tend to look at things like, has this problem been solved before elsewhere? So I think
if it's not, that's a green light for you, is it?
It's one of the things that says, okay, interesting. Now it makes you ask more questions. Well, why hasn't it been solved before? Maybe I'm walking into a world where it's just impossible to solve. But I've worked in a few industries, so Gusto recipe boxes hadn't really been wasn't a solved problem. So I thought, okay, some interesting problems there. How do we do this at scale?
Solved it.
And Gusto is now growing and is very successful on that basis. Jumped into the world of Onto in the EV subscription space. Subscriptions for cars was a new thing. EVs were a new thing. How do we get this to work? Now, difficult ending there, but some very good lessons, some very good kind of pieces.
I wanted to touch on that. No time like the present. Tell me about those lessons that you got from there.
Yeah. So to give you a bit of context, so. I joined Onto probably at the time, just going through a Series B funding round, just doing the due diligence at that point in time. About 60 people in the company, maybe 12 people in technology. No real kind of structure in technology, and took over from very much a guy who'd been doing an amazing job as a lead engineer, but didn't really want that CTO role and didn't really know how to grow a team. So came on board, helped him to move into a kind of chief architect role. And we grew that team probably over the next 18 months. We grew that from 12 to 55 in tech, and an overall organisation. We took it from about 60 to 175. We probably spent the first probably maybe 12 to 18 months looking at getting a good product strategy in place, getting the basics in place, starting to build out the foundations. But we also then started to focus in on how do we go to a new market. So we started to look at to go into a German market with subscriptions. The theory was we need to expand this into multiple markets to be a viable business and to show that we've got the scale to kind of get that next round of funding. Unfortunately, probably after about just under 2 years, we started to hit the end of that 22-23 period where you were talking about. Obviously, the landscape changed dramatically. What also changed, though, was we were a big owner of EVs. So we probably owned in the region of 100 to 150 million pounds worth of cars.
Wow.
We had the biggest EV fleet in Europe, but that came with some downsides when the value of EV started dropping. Unfortunately, they kept dropping. they probably dropped between 25 and 40% in that kind of 6 to 9 month period. And every time that happened, we had to put money into the loans that we bought for those cars to make up for the deficit in the value dropping.
Wow.
And so every month we had a check to write, and slowly but surely we were spending our equity on kind of writing that
How
check.
does that feel from an internal basis? So you're sat there on the board, you're a CTO, you're keeping the lights on, you've got a busy job which you're doing, you've got a complex problem to solve, all that sort of stuff. In the meantime, you've got this additional stress of seeing the future effectively get ever closer.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the first couple of months, there's to a certain extent a bit of denial in it. Yeah. You can kind of pretend this might stop at some stage, and I had my first kind of world of automotive, so I didn't really understand much about automotive, but my automotive experts were saying, oh, well, it's never dropped this far before, and if it does, it comes back, and all this sort of stuff. So you're kind of thinking, well, okay, at some point it will. So your focus there is still driving the team, still putting the right things in place, still trying to push towards that global expansion, still doing all the things that you were doing before. We then hit a point where we basically said, look, we have to do something now, and so we took quite a painful round of redundancies with particularly the tech team, where I pretty much halved my team down from about 55 to about 30.
Tough.
Very tough, especially given that
these are people you developed.
I brought them in. They trusted me, frankly, to come into an organisation. So very difficult to do that. How did you feel with that? Oh, very tough. I mean, I'd like to think we did it the right way, but it was massively tough. I think it's probably far worse because you built it. Yeah. I think if I was probably in another, it might be a little bit easier if I was in a different company and I didn't build it, but building it and then tearing it apart is soul shattering. Yeah. So it was definitely a tough time, probably from the end of 22 for me, right up until when, unfortunately, things went a full bang in September, and lots of highs and lows along the way. We were put up for sale. It leaked that publicly that our lead investor had pulled out at one point on Sky News, and that literally leaked, and we ended up with, not knowing it was going to leak, a team that were going to find out from this Sky News article. We had to bring everybody into a room pretty quickly and tell them what had happened, and literally kind of crisis comms in that 2-hour period to make sure that everybody understands what's happening. We then went through the highs and lows of potential purchases along the way. We went up for distressed sale, people coming along. We went on a bit of a demoing showcase around showing up software to different people, trying to sell to generally larger organizations that were perhaps established in the kind of rental spaces or leasing spaces to try to sell the business. But literally we ended up in too many months past. Unfortunately, we thought we'd got a sale secured. It fell through at the last minute, and that led to kind of having to make another significant proportion of the team redundant. So definitely a very tough kind of 9 months. It's certainly, from a personal point of view, it's not your plan. It's not where you thought you were going to end up. It's not where things panned out. But then there's also the other side of things, which genuinely you feel that responsibility for the people that you've brought into the team, and all I could do through that is help them to understand what was happening and give them the best way out of it, I guess. And
so going back to those lessons bit from that sort of thing. Look, it's never a comfortable or a nice situation to go through, but I'm a big believer in turning negatives into positives. So for your career and what you picked up in that, and the experience, what do you think some of the positives that come out of that are, and what's allowed you to become a better leader because of it?
I guess understanding what happens during that process and understanding how you react to it probably makes you a bit more resilient to going through that at some point in the future. Now hopefully we never have to, but it might happen again, and I think it just helps you to understand that you can get through it. This is how you do it. This is the way you go through things. I think there's also a lot of learning about I guess perhaps the fragility of companies in some ways. All this stuff that you think could be working really well can end at some point. And so I think there's a couple of things that come from that. First of all, be careful how you spend your money, because it's not infinite, it's pretty finite. I've probably come out there a much more respectful leader to how we spend commercial money, if you like,
yeah.
And that comes from somewhere and ultimately needs to kind of be accounted for. So that's certainly a change. If you saw Ben 2 or 3 years ago, I would probably be a lot more blasé about spending X on a tool, whereas I now know truly what X means, and is that the thing that you want to be spending that money on. So I think that's definitely different. And then I think the other piece is, and this is the challenging part, is during that period I think it can feel very hard personally that there's failure there, there's is this the end of my career, is those sorts of kind of things go through your head.
Cascade thinking, right?
And you learn you can bounce back and you can go into other organisations and you can enjoy working again. It's a difficult time for that 9 months, but I hopefully now have started to bounce back, started to feel the positivity. Getting a new team and a new set of challenges is really, really exciting, and it does bounce back. You do get to.
We spoke about it before we came in. Look, it's 3 months into your career now. You're sat there and you're learning a new environment, and you can see the excitement that you've got within it, right? And coming back into it, spring back in your step, and a good challenge. You're now going into, from going in through a growth phase and then having that sort of a rest and decline, you're coming into something which is really interesting, where a CTO has been in position and has moved out from it. You're replacing that. You've got an established team. You're 3 months into that. To a CTO who's moving into a business at the moment, who's taking over a team. Look, I've been in a position where I've taken over sales teams in the past. And it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to deal with people there who are positioning. They're worried about that. What that means, and will they be fancied by that particular leader? Do they have to sort of assert their authority over you in some sort of instances? So, if you've got a couple of lessons from taking into this and what you picked up so far, and what you've learned, I guess, from moving into to other places, from Gusto to wherever else in between. What have you learned from this one?
I think the first one is probably, at that start point, you've got to take your time and listen and learn a lot.
I think it's so important, isn't it?
It's very easy to come in and say, I've got my way.
The highway,
this is how it works. This is how I've done it before. Now, I think what I've learned is probably some of the things you are right about at that early stage, but a lot of them you're not. And you need to kind of listen and learn how it works in context, because there's no one way to
make change as well.
And take people along that journey, because they are going to be nervous, I don't always get this right. Sometimes you can go in a little bit too hard, and you can ask a few too many questions, and you can make people feel even more nervous about, well, why is he asking these questions? What's he trying to get at? What's he trying to do? So that's probably the biggest learning that came from it. I think the second one is, having worked in a few different organisations, there are patterns that work well, and I think there, at some stage and at the right stage, once you've listened, you then have to be confident enough of which one of those patterns you're going to implement. So that might be ways of working, team structures, those sorts of things, because these patterns exist for a reason, and you've done them successfully in other places. But you have to take people through that journey and that change. They're not just going to naturally buy it because you said. They don't have that level of trust with you yet. You've got to build that level of trust. So I'm probably just about getting to that stage now, I think.
Where you can start to do it. A CTO once said to me that it's a battle of winning hearts and minds, and once you've got that, you can then start to move people into your philosophy. And I remember when I took over a team many years ago, they were saying, you sit on your hands for 3 months, don't do anything for 3, and I found it so difficult. But actually it was a really great bit of advice to do that same sort of thing as well. So Ben, I could be talking about this, I've had the wave from behind the camera, I could be talking about this for a long time. It's a fascinating story, and I think there's so much to learn from that journey for you. But indulge me with a question that's not an easy one to answer without any sort of prep, but I'm going to throw it at you anyway. If you can sort of be speaking to someone the other side of the thing there, who's an aspiring engineering manager, in a similar sort of way to where or head of engineering that we sort of sat with you 8 years ago and say, right, this is the benefit of that sort of time. Here's 4 or 5 things, or 2 or 3 things that you can do to become a CEO of a high performing team. What do you think the focus should be?
So we touched on a couple. I think appreciate that EQ is as if not more important than IQ, and therefore you're going to have to go through some change. I think understand that that's probably going to be difficult, and you're probably going to make quite a few mistakes along the way. I definitely made quite a few mistakes along the way.
Don't believe it.
I think find if you can, find a good mentor, leader to work with to help you go along that journey.
Yeah.
Because I think that's probably one of the things that helped me to go down that route, was having that support, having that somebody who genuinely cared about helping me to be successful. And if you can find that person, brilliant. And that doesn't, the easiest person for that to be is your current manager, but it doesn't have to be. If your current manager's not the right sort of person, perhaps there's other people out there who can help you. And then I think one bit of advice I've given to a lot of people recently is around compromise. So people go to look for a new role or look for that next step, and they say, here's everything on a bit of paper that I want. Here's the 10 bullet points, and if I can get all those 10 things, brilliant. Now, what you often realize is that in order to make that transition into that growth, you have to compromise on a few of those things. And so I've personally had to compromise on a number of things along that way. Sometimes you have to take a down on your salary in order to make that step up. And I've certainly had to do that along my journey. And I always, my core belief was you should just be able to keep getting paid more because you're more experienced, and that's the way it works. But where are you willing to compromise? Because it's going to be challenges in the way.
So important that, isn't it? I think so many people look about pounds and pence today and tomorrow, and they forget to look at the next 5, 10, 15 years of their career. And I spend a lot of time talking to our team about helping people go on that journey to make the right choice for their career as opposed to the right pay packet for today. And I think but that compromise piece and thinking about where you want to go and thinking of the journey rather than just what today's job looks like, I think is a really important bit of advice within there as well. Loved it. Great chatting through and hearing about it all. Let's finish on the company and talk about Flock. I think it was Series B last year.
Yep.
$38 million worth of investment. Exciting things, a lot of opportunity. Obviously, the right market and a good time, for where you're at. What can we expect to see? What's exciting about it that's coming out of the company in the next in 2024?
Yeah. So I think we've got a few things that are exciting. First of all, we've gone through that phase of getting the foundations right, and so we are really looking to kind of continue to scale that business. Now, in the world we are, we're essentially what's called an MGA, a managing general agent, which means that we essentially sell other people's insurance. So one of the things we have to do is partner with people, and if you look out there, you'll probably see a few kind of press releases of starting to partner with more people. I think the biggest tech challenge we have this year is to continue to show how we can use that data we have more to underwrite better. Because we've shown some of the very basics there, and I can give you an example. We now know that being able to report an accident within generally the first 4 hours of that accident happening can lead to the cost of that accident being, the cost of that claim being about a quarter.
Is that right?
Yeah. And it's massively different, and there's a few different reasons behind that. One of them is a insurance sector kind of quirk in terms of the way that they kind of manage third-party claims. But a lot of that is down to being able to control the claim and being able to manage it with the right garages, with the right places, that sort of thing. So a lot of what we do is we call it interventions. We intervene with our fleets to give them advice about driving more safely, and then an understanding of how they can deal with claims the right way. So the best fleets for us are ones that understand that and then almost incentivize their drivers to be, I've had an accident, not, I'll see if anybody notices that. And 3 weeks later, there's a scratch on the side of the car, and I didn't do that.
It wasn't me.
And then that's a far bigger challenge to do. So we really need to continue to do more with that data we've got, continue to expand that, continue to get better at risk prediction, and then that all leads to the kind of nice flywheel of driving our prices down, driving that price down for our customers, and then making us even more attractive. So that's really probably the biggest challenge I have for the year.
That's an exciting challenge to get your teeth into, isn't it? It's the same sort of time. So very, very exciting times. And Ben, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want, if they see you as that potential mentor, or if they want to find out a little bit more about the business? How do they get in touch?
So reach out on LinkedIn. I'm pretty public on there. Say you've seen me on the podcast, and I'd love to kind of chat, and hopefully you found some of the conversation useful.
Well, I certainly did. So it's been brilliant having you on the show.
Perfect.
Thanks so much for coming on today. Really enjoyed it. And thank you all for watching. We will see you soon on the next episode of FinTech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.